Think I'm going to have a bit of a battle with the sun here for recognition. Really annoying. But yeah, this is the place I came back to. I recorded some of my stuff here. And so yeah. If you are somebody who has fuck this shit, take this off because it gets so glossy. If you're somebody who has consumed my content before, you will know that I'm not exactly the biggest fan of society. It's virtually all I talk about, and maybe that's for a lack of creative, you know, elbow grease, but I really am not able to provide anything else, it seems. So, let's talk a little bit about why I think society is unjust. And so the title of this video should be The Injustice System and the Hypocritic Oath. And I'll try off the dome, off the cuff, to develop those concepts here in the gamut of this video. Now, why do I call it the injustice system? Obviously, it's supposed to be the justice system, but I have generously changed it to injustice system. Now, why would I have done such a thing? Well, basically, I think that justice is essentially impossible. You'll be familiar with concepts like, free will, but how far are you willing to take that concept, or the denial of that concept, that there really is no such thing as free will, and people are just essentially effects of causes, effects of their environment? Well, I'm willing to take it quite far, but I want to lay out my specific view, because it might be different from somebody else's. That, it's not that I deny justice because I'm a genetic determinist and I just think everything is boiled down to genes, and the environment has severe limitations on what can be changed. It's actually the opposite. I would say that it's the environment, ex post facto, retroactively, that changes the genetics. And so, so just think about how a movie is made, right? Or a video like this one. If you go on the little bar, the player bar, you'll see that you can make out a picture. Like everywhere you move it, you can make out a picture, like a thumbnail. At least on PC. I don't know if it works on the phone, but so the video essentially is made up of these little frames, right? They call frames. 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second. The higher the frame rate, the higher the quality, right? And but the point is that that's how all video is made, especially back in the day when it wasn't digital. It was literally just a tape. It was just a cord, and they ran it right on the machine or whatever. And so you could see that everything, the video is really just made up of the frames, and so I will liken that to genetic determinism, that everything is made up of genetics, and your potential is genetically encoded and limited. Like people say, autism is or IQ or something like that has a high uh, hereditability, the ableness of being inherited, uh, and so they would like to deny that the environment can do much to change that factor. And I would say the reverse. I would say that everything is made up of genes. Every living being is made up of genes. Okay, but it's like frames of a movie, snapshots. Individually, they don't make any coherent sense. You have to run it. You have to run the tape. You have to put the framework, the frames together, and that will make the movie. And I think that's what we mean when we say the environment. Right? The environment is essentially the emergent property of the genetics and genes. Genetic determinism is not sufficient to explain the environment, because it can only explain the frames. It can say, okay, the movie is made up of frames. That would be the genes, right? But it cannot put the picture together. When you put the picture together, that's when you get the movie, and that's what we call the environment. So I feel like there's something limiting about the concept of genetic determinism, that everything is essentially just your genes, neurons firing, synapses that connect the neurons or whatever. Everything is made up of that, and the environment is nothing for it. It's not. The environment is just a place for the genes to express themselves. I don't think that's enough, because it's incapable of answering systemic questions, like the question of race and IQ, for example. That some smart ass guy might say, like, so and so black kids have lower IQ, and why could that possibly be? Well, of course, it's because of the environment. But if you buy this genetic determinist viewpoint, you really can tell a social story, a societal story about why that happens. Because to you, all you can look at is the IQ and the genes, and you say, well, that's what it is. And maybe there's nothing we can do to change it, because IQ has high hereditary properties, so don't bother, right? Whereas I think the correct picture would be, yes, IQ is genetically determined, but this determination already takes place in what we call the environment. And so it essentially has infinite potential. Like people say, like, that there is a human nature. Like, we can't fly, we don't have we can't breathe underwater, we don't have gills, but we could. You know what I mean? Like, we could. And it's only a mere contingency that we don't. So I think that genetic determinism simply fetters itself to the current moment, and it can only explain the contingency of the present, and it cannot give you a coherent picture about the whole of the world. In order to do that, to at least give you a sketch of the world as a whole, you do need this idea of the environment, which retroactively determines what genes are expressed, and that has infinite potential. We could essentially develop gills or wings or any of that stuff. That is not impossible. But if you're a genetic determinist, you will say, well, that just doesn't exist, so it cannot exist, right? And so you simply deny You cannot account for why that would be possible, because you can only, because you're an empiricist. Right? That's the limit of empiricism. That's the limit of looking at the science, is that the only things that you can capture are the things that happen to exist right now. And you cannot account for the infinite contingency of the world. So I would like to adopt a more contingent based philosophy, where we don't just pretend everything is solved by looking at the genome. So I would like to go against what is sometimes called reductionism, physicalist reductionism, genetic determinism, and so on. This is essentially the failure of empiricist epistemology, that you can just look at the world and measure the world and suddenly you have all the facts. But there's something missing. There is just something missing in the picture. And what is missing is what we call the environment, which is the supervening property over the genes. It's something that's macroscopic and it's emergent. It emerges out of the genes. And so, the limit of empiricism is that it doesn't satisfy itself with an incomplete explanation. It seeks a complete explanation by wanting to reduce everything to genes and physical properties, and in that process it loses the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is what we call the environment, and it will never give us a complete picture, only a sketch, but that's what we need to adopt. If you adopt a genetic determinist viewpoint, it's very easy to fall into stereotypes with race and IQ and that sort of stuff, because all you have to say is, well, look, their IQ is lower, and IQ has high hereditary properties, so I guess that's just the way it is. And it's like, that's not just the way it is, it's much more complicated. So that would be, I guess, theory number one, postulate number one, to get us to the next point, which is that the world is fundamentally unjust. I think that there is no higher philosophy or higher power that makes us the way we are. I think it's all contingent and cold. And so fundamentally there is no justice in the universe. And what we should do, what we should have done, is try to mitigate the injustice of the world. But I think we have not done a good job of doing that. I think if you look at society, it's not just that we haven't done a good job. It's more like it's pretty much impossible to do a good job. And I'll tell you why. It's impossible to do a good job because the variables are just too complicated. There's too many of them and they're too complicated. So just take this example, right? Say that you were bullied in school, right? And your parents abused you and that sort of stuff. And you have autism and mental disorder, let's say depression or bipolar or something like that, or even multiple, like myself. Society will not give you too many provisions. They might give you some, or they might not give you any, but they will not give you a paycheck. They will not give you a boost in your paycheck because you suffer all those problems. They just say, okay, maybe we give you a little bit, or maybe we give you nothing, but you still have to go and work and compete with everyone else. And while at the same time, your peers who were, not mentally ill, who were not, let's say, autistic, they were not bullied in school or not as badly as you, they were not abused by their parents, or maybe a little bit but not as much as you, right? They will not get a deduction for that. They will not, you know what I mean? Like, we're just supposed to pretend this is an even playing field, that somebody who is environmentally lucky and genetically superior, genetically lucky in the sense of, just not having autistic genes and that sort of stuff, and not having been abused terribly, they're not pulled down by society the same way that the abused person is pulled down, and then barely given any provisions for that discrepancy, to make up for the discrepancy, or nothing at all. Obviously, most of the world, you got nothing. And so we are supposed to pretend that, if I make $100,000 and as the abused person, and he makes $100,000 as the environmentally and genetically lucky person, that's somehow fair, right? Because it's the same job, you produce the same amount of value. The economy, the economic theory tells you, and so we're not gonna pretend like your 100,000, that your 100,000 is really 200,000 to his 100,000, because for you it was just so much harder to get to that point. And so we're just supposed to swallow all that discrepancy and pretend it isn't there, and if you complain, then you're a pussy and a bitch, and you want special privileges, and you're a victim, so they shut you down pretty fucking quick, right? Disabled people, all they want is equal rights, but it's really not possible to get equal rights. And that's the funny thing, is that this term disability is too broad, you know what I mean? It's not just being in a wheelchair that's disabling. And it's not just blindness or autism that's disabling. It's also things like being mentally ill, having complex PTSD from bullying or abuse, some other kind of abuse, having depression, having OCD, having ADHD, having social anxiety, bipolar. I essentially have all of those. But more or less, it's hard because I don't have an OCD and an ADHD diagnosis, but I have a bipolar 1 diagnosis, depression, anxiety, autism. I also took an OCD test, and I virtually maxed it out. But my shrink said it's not an official diagnosis. But of course I know it, but I basically have OCD. And I also have ADHD, so I must have like 5 or 6 mental illnesses and a developmental disability called autism. That's what it's called. It's a developmental disorder. So obviously I'm also traumatized from school abuse I suffered, I suppose. But, I get very little recognition for all of that. In fact, the only recognition I get is for autism. And even that's new, right? I think they only recognize it as a disability in my country like a couple of years ago. And I'm sure in most countries they still don't recognize it. But even that, now that they do, you get very little for it. You don't, you get much less than what you should be receiving if you he wanted to create a more or less equal playing field. But that's the point I made earlier, is that there really is no way to make an equal playing field because of the example that I mentioned. Or yeah, I mean, the fact underlying that example, that if I make 100,000, somebody with 4, 5, 6 mental illnesses, disabilities, whatever, and some other dude making 100,000 who is in every way predisposed to make 100,000, that's just it's just not the same amount of value if you're willing to include in the definition of value something like natural ability and disability and things of that sort. But then of course most people who have a harder time making it in the world don't even make it to the same level. So it's naturally dished out, right? It's naturally cashed out. It's a bell curve. Everybody fits on the bell curve. So they don't even recognize, you don't even get to that point most of the time when you're mentally ill, disabled, you have problems. Don't even make it to the same level. I mean, even then you would deserve more money. You would deserve more, provisions. But probably you're not gonna get it, and even then, most people don't even make it to that point, right? Because you're just naturally predisposed to not make a lot of money if you're fucked in the head. For various reasons, it's hard to work, or impossible to work, really. I mean, in my case, it's really bad. I really, I can't even go to the store sometimes, or I don't want to, because it just scares me so much, But I'm still required to make money. They don't take care of me, really. The state doesn't just take care of me. And whatever you think of that, you cannot think that it's fair, right? Because of it's just not the same playing field. And yet I'm required to pretend that it's the same playing field, that there's not something unjust going on here. That, if I take a job, and I signed a work contract, if we say $7 an hour, $10 an hour, whatever, and that's, I get paid the legal tender, the legal amount of money for my required amount of work, and there will not be 17 extra pages in that document about how I actually deserve double the money because I have to work twice as hard to reach the same amount of energy that everybody else reaches. That my maintenance is so much higher. I mean, there might be some provision for disability, but there is actually. I'm just saying that in the real world, it really doesn't amount to much. It doesn't amount to much. You get a couple extra days off or something, and you get no checkout. It's all different in every country, I'm sure, but one thing I'm certain of is that it's nowhere enough, and in many places it's probably non-existent. And so, this idea that somehow there's some fairness going on when you just know the natural predispositions are there, and the environment is not good enough to make up for them. And in a way, like I said, my complaint is futile because it never will be good enough. I admit it. It's never going to be fair because people are different, but it doesn't mean it's an excuse to not try. And they don't really try. Every disabled person, neurodivergent person with mental illness, whatever you like to identify yourself as, knows intrinsically inside that the provisions are not good enough, that nobody really gives a fuck about them, that You go to the psychiatrist. Many of you have, those who are in the same boat. You talk to a friend, you talk to a parent, you talk to a psychologist, but inside you sort of feel that it's futile, that nothing they say or nothing they will do will fix you to the required amount. That's something that's understood by us all who are fucked up enough beyond a certain point. You just know that no matter how many therapy sessions you attend, no matter how many antipsychotics, antidepressants, SSRIs, whatever, Xanax, mood stabilizers, I've taken them all. No matter how many you take, it's never going to be good enough. It's never going to be good enough. Maybe it will help you a little, but you just know inside that you're just not able to perform on that level. And you will always be scared and alone, essentially. That's the universal experience for people who are truly divergent, right? And that's why I hate. There's some recognition of this online. Like I've seen some memes where people are like, "Oh, so you support neurodivergent people?" And then they put like, "Neurodivergent person does something disgusting." Suddenly, all the support is gone. Like, you only support neurodivergent people until they do something divergent. That's something other people and I have noticed. And the most obvious example for me is if you're somebody who's watched my videos, you're sick of hearing this, but the most obvious example I know is from No Longer Human, novel by Osamu Dazai, and you probably know that by now because it's getting pretty popular these days. And the example is that lots of people hate the book on Goodreads. Like if you go to this page that's about like reviewing books, Goodreads, there'll be lots of women there who will shit all over the book and call it misogynist. And these are the same women who are out there campaigning for neurodivergent rights and disability rights and anti-ableism. But then when when they encounter somebody who is truly divergent, like Yozo from No Longer Human, who because of his neurodivergence does nasty things and says nasty things, suddenly they jump ship. They bail. They're no longer keen on supporting neurodivergent people. The moment they do something that's really divergent, they're out of there. So, and every true neurodivergent person, again, whatever you identify as, you could be an incel, a NEET, a hikikomori, a neurodivergent, whatever you identify as, I know that you're there. Like, it doesn't really matter which label you use. There's a class of people that are essentially just fucked in the head, that are really incapable of functioning properly in society. The underdogs, whatever, the wretched. You're there, and all of you know that they don't really mean it when they say they support you. They see you as freaks. Even my shrink sees me as a freak. Like she said that if we just had a conversation and she wasn't trying to help me, she would be depressed. I would depress her. But she says I make her happy because she can help me, or so she believes. But even last time, man, she made me take this OCD test. I could tell that she just felt sorry for me. I just felt this energy in the room where that, you know, she must be just so filled with, I'm a bummer, you know. I drag her down. I could tell that she just feels so sorry for me because she knows that I'm depressed. She knows that I have anxiety. She knows that I'm autistic. She knows that I have a hearing problem. She knows that I have bipolar, which she diagnosed me with. And I obviously have it because she gave me another med for bipolar 1. And now I took the OCD test and I almost maxed it out. I mean, if there was 100 points, I probably made 80. You know. So clearly, I have OCD as well. And by that same token, I probably have ADHD as well. I would probably max that out too. I almost told her. Yeah, I mean, later I thought, you might as well just give me an ADHD test. I would ace that too. On top of all that, I also have a learning disorder, dyscalculia, also diagnosed. So I have all these problems. And anyway, so I could tell that she just felt so sorry for me, that I'm such a bummer, that I have all these problems. Just an insane number, just an insane amount of pain and suffering, really. And that's only dawned on me. That only dawned on me a while ago. How unfortunate I actually am. You know, it's been slowly sinking in. I'm just so unfortunate, you know. Here you have somebody, a 24-year-old young man, who is just has no friends, no girlfriend, can drive, doesn't have a job because he's too anxious for those things. I have bad hand-eye coordination, so I always suck that I wouldn't be a good driver. I could never perform physical labor very well. Like, I actually went to a technical high school once. You know, like a prep, whatever the fuck it's called. You know, when you learn a skill, like a profession, trade school, I guess. And I was a bricklayer. I was there for like a month, 2 months in the 9th grade. And my wall that I built, it wasn't like you know, a real. We built it with like mud and some kind of like mud clay stuff that you could break down afterwards. Anyway, so you know, you would have to build a wall, whatever, 2 feet long, I don't know, 1 brick, or maybe 2 bricks wide, and you would have to use the water level to make sure it's level, all that kind of stuff. You know, a bucket, a scalpel, whatever, like a real bricklayer would, except with fake cohesive, I guess. And I was the only one, as far as I could tell, who got an F. And I had many other examples of this. I you know, whenever this class, you know, in primary school or anywhere else, would do something technical, like, I don't know, make a plush, or maybe, I don't know, whatever, make a craft, you know, I would be the only one who couldn't do it. So I guess I'm just saying that I also have bad hand-eye coordination, and so that limits my abilities. Like, you know, my parents pushed me to become forklift certified, and I would work with a forklift, but to me that sounded impossible. You know, the idea of me working a forklift just sounded impossible. But so I basically never had a job except as a security guard, because I thought I am literally too retarded to do anything else. And in terms of mental labor, like intellectual labor, white collar labor, I tried to be a programmer, but I failed because I suck at math, right? And maybe you could say, okay, you have you are intelligent, you have high verbal IQ. That's true. My only ability essentially is verbal intelligence, creativity, that sort of stuff. But again, I couldn't be a lawyer or something like this because I'm too anxious. I'm too mentally ill. So I could have easily made a lot of money as some kind of marketing person or a lawyer or a copywriter. I don't know. I could have been an academic, all kinds of stuff easily. But my anxiety and my mental disorders made it so that I withdrew my application to university. I knew I couldn't complete it. Because whenever somebody tells me to do something, my first instinct is to not to do it. So if I'm given homework, I just don't do it. I just wouldn't do it. Even when I was preparing for my exams to graduate high school, to matriculate, is what we call it here, I just wouldn't study shit. I wouldn't study a goddamn prompt that we had, because we had a bunch of prompts that you would have to study. And I just wouldn't study a single one. I would never study. Even though I was intellectually curious and intelligent, I just wouldn't study. Every school I went to, I sucked at. And there were only 2 classes that I excelled in: English and Hungarian. Which for you, if you're American, that would be English. But for me, English is actually a separate subject, and we have Hungarian, which is where you study literature and linguistics. But because I'm not English, it's a different thing. Or American. Anyway, you get the point. I would suck. Those would be the only classes where I would excel. Every other class, and I would never study. I would study maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes sometimes. Couple of times I would study a little bit, but only because the only reason why I did it is because I took some kind of perverted pleasure out of impressing the teacher. Like I wasn't doing it to get good grades. I was literally only doing it because I put it into my head that I wanna feel smarter than the teacher was. So what I would do is I would write these incredibly complicated, dense essays that could have been written by a professor or like a graduate student. And I was like in 12th grade, although I was already 20 by then, 19, 20. But I would put like Latin words in it. I would make it really fucking complicated and dense, when the only reason I was doing it is to feel smarter than the teacher. That was the only reason. I didn't care about my future at all. I don't give a fuck. I thought about it a couple of times, but basically I didn't give a fuck. I was doing it essentially purely to impress the teacher, in a kind of perverted way, to show off. But I could never do it for an honest reason. I could never do it just because I'm interested in it or just because I want to go to college. I could never be so honest. Even the security guard job, which I had later, I had to quit because I just couldn't take the stress of it. Right? And so you can understand that people who are like this will never be understood. Because if you're not as fucked up as me and as screwed up as me, you will never understand how it's possible for somebody to be that fucked up. You will never get how it's possible to quit a security guard job because it's too stressful, when all I had to do was sit there essentially. You will never get it. And I was just supposed to take it, you know. I was just sitting there like, what the fuck am I doing? Sitting on the toilet, you know, in the storage room. I had to go to a separate building to get to the toilet. Dark, empty ass fucking room. You know, I would sit on the toilet. I would be like, what the fuck am I doing here? I knew my talents were being wasted. And all because I'm fucked in the head. And all because nobody cares. You know, there's so many people out there with talents who are just robbed of their potential because society doesn't understand them. You know, they don't get a stipend. They don't get a chance, an opportunity. And so I think fundamentally the injustice of society is that it essentially defers responsibility to the individual. So this is maybe shifting a little bit the topic, but you know, like if you have a criminal, and I made this point before, but it's salient, so I'm going to make it here too, that you know, if you have a criminal and all his life he's been abused, bullied, beaten, all kinds of terrible things happen to him, then he goes in front of in front of a court, in front of a judge. He stands trial, right? And everybody is equal before the law. All that, what a fucking lie. And he gets sentenced because he robbed the store. He did something else that's bad. And so they jail him or imprison him on the, you know, because he was convicted. He really did do the crime, right? So of course he's going to be convicted then. He deserves to be convicted, right? He's a bad guy. But his father who beat him, his mother who abandoned him, you know, couldn't pay for his life. His peers who bullied him, the principal who wouldn't do anything to stop the bullying. That's a universal one, right? The mayor, the president, everybody who is somehow in a position of authority who could have done something to better the system but didn't, you know, they don't go to prison, at least for not that crime. Like, you know what I mean? That yeah, what sense does it make? I mean, it's almost like believing that people in Brazil or Mexico are somehow worse people than people in Switzerland. It's like they're not. They just have better opportunities. So the implication of this view that everyone is equal before the law and everyone needs to stand trial for their crimes, they are responsible for their actions, it's just a fucking stupid ideology. It's discriminative. It says that people in poorer countries and poorer neighborhoods are somehow worse people. And that's just not true. It's just it's a matter of the circumstance. You know? People in Switzerland are not better people. People in Belgium are not better people. People in Japan are not better people. They just have better opportunities. You know? The implication of this view is really dangerous and disgusting when you think about it. This personal responsibility bullshit. But that's all a court can do. It can only hear a particular case. And even if it's class action, it's still just a case. The court can never investigate the society and the norms and rules of society because those are just beyond the remit of the court. They just can't deal with it. So they only defer responsibility to the individual inmate, or, convicted person or person of interest, the criminal, the whatever, and then sentence them. And is there even an argument that why should you let society judge you? Like, if I do a crime and then I give myself up, say, why would you assume that society even deserves to judge you? you know these are my anarchist leanings, I guess, reading Stirner. But I'm just saying, everything is questionable here. The justice system, that's why I call it the injustice system. So hopefully I gave you a picture of why I call it the injustice system, because it's just it's discriminative. And I would also like to hear a breakdown, or see a breakdown of the percentage of inmates, convicted people, prisoners, or people who are in jail. I would like to know what percentage of them are mentally ill. I would like to know what percentage of them are traumatized. I would like to know what percentage of them are autistic. I would like to know these things. How many of them were abused? I would like to know. And then it would be found out that what we call an inmate is really just a victim of other people's crimes, and the crime of the system as such. That if you're if you're of sound mind, in the sense that you're not mentally unwell, if you grew up in a nice neighborhood with nice parents, or decent parents at least, you're an average person, or an above average person, or even a slightly below average person, it will be found out that those people are not criminals. And then you can see the only reason why they're not criminals is because they drew the longer end of the stick. Like, I saw this sometimes on YouTube, these court videos pop up where there's like a judge, and I saw one video where a guy was complaining that a criminal was a felon was complaining that he drew the longer end of the shorter end of the stick. And then the judge had a meltdown. He's like, nobody draws the short end of the stick in this court before this judge. And it's like, yeah, he does. Like, he insisted that his court is fair. But it's only fair within the context of the system. If you analyze the understructure of the system, you will come to see that it's not just at all. It's an injustice system. And that's not the fault of the judge. I'm not saying that, okay, so what should we do? Should we just let criminals free? No, I'm just complaining. I'm just saying, don't put yourself on a pedestal and pretend that don't pretend that your society is fair. Don't pretend that everything is okay and everything is fine and what little problem there is can be fixed. It's a bullshit. It cannot be fixed. Don't be satisfied. Don't be glib. Don't don't hold your nose too high. We like to say in Hungary. If you are not a criminal, you're just lucky. Just luck. Blind luck. And then, you know, the other side of the debate, which I have here, is the Hippocratic Oath. Now, of course, the Hippocratic Oath is supposed to be a play on the Hippocratic Oath, right? That doctors have to take. It says, first, do no harm. The job of a doctor is to never do any harm. I think that many of us have, this is already negated by the fact that many of us, I think, have had really negative experiences with doctors. I feel like this is not something that people like to talk about because it's really private and uncomfortable, but especially here in Eastern Europe, I don't know how it is in different places of the world. It's difficult to know, but in Eastern Europe, usually the doctors are assholes. And so, they have this idea that do no harm. It's pretty hard to maintain as an idea when you know that, doctors are fucking yelling in your ear and, verbally abusing people and that sort of stuff. I have heard many experiences like this, and I've been the recipient of it. But, I guess the more philosophical point I want to make about this is that, that is this assisted suicide topic that, first I thought this idea was really radical, this idea that you should have the right to kill yourself legally assisted by a doctor for mental illness. I thought it was really radical, but honestly, the more I think about it, the more sense it makes. It people just don't want to accept this idea that some people are just far beyond help, and you never want to put yourself in the group who's far beyond help. But I feel like I'm one of them. When you get to have about 5 or 6 mental illnesses, a developmental disorder, learning disability, just all kinds of crushing problems, you just sort of get fed up with the world. And I don't know, it just feels like some people do deserve a calm way out. But I also find something really depressing about assisted suicide, because it's like you just want to die on a bed, like somehow it's so much it feels so much cooler to do it on your own. But we know that it's very dangerous and you could screw it up, and it's sad, and other people will find you, and it's just overall it gets to be a pretty nasty affair. And I was watching this guy on YouTube that it's not many people know about this, but it's a guy who was called Adam Mayer Clayton. Adam Mayer Clayton. Mayer Clayton, yeah. Who had some kind of mysterious disease. Basically what is a psychosomatic disease. So it originates in the brain. It's a mental health disease, but it has physical symptoms. Like, he was basically saying that he was in pain all the time. It caused him chronic physical pain. He described it as a burning sensation all over, several parts of his body. And on top of that, he had OCD and some other illnesses like depression, and he said he felt empty on the inside, and the OCD was putting terrible ideas in his head, and he was taking a bunch of medicines, trying a bunch of stuff, and it still wouldn't work. So he was campaigning to extend the the bill in Canada which allowed for assisted suicide. He campaigned for it to be extended, uh, to cover mental health issues, so that even if you're not terminally ill, you could still qualify for assisted suicide, which I believe is still not legal. This is only legal maybe in a few places in the world, like Belgium. And so, he ended up, it didn't go through, obviously, because it still hasn't. And this was years ago. So he basically, he couldn't get somebody to, he couldn't get the parliament to pass such a bill in time, so he actually killed himself. Somebody got him some poison and he killed himself. Under the table, somebody just got him some poison and he killed himself alone in a room. And so when I say the hypocritic oath, I mean that I see a lot of ways in which, not necessarily individual doctors, it's never really a good idea to talk about individuals, because they all function within something like a system, and individuals are just what they are. But the medical profession in general, I see it as often really fucking people up, right? That if you're somebody who takes meds like I do, unfortunately, I might stop. I mean, I don't give a fuck. It doesn't do much for me, to be honest. Does help me sleep. So you suffer from insomnia, it might be that if you take some of these drugs, it might help you sleep. Just a heads up, if you're considering it. But you have to go to a shrink. You have to keep going back. First weekly, now I'm going like every 3 weeks. But I also have to go to therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, which is no doubt going to be completely useless. I've already done it twice, and I just no longer went. I just quit. That's how I usually end everything. I just quit. I just literally just stop doing it. I have no capacity to continue anything. My first reaction, if I do something, all right, I've already done it. It's over. Like, why keep doing the same thing over and over again? You do it once, all right, we're done. It's over. But anyway, so it's getting a little bit old. I feel like I'm running up against the wall these days. My situation is not getting better; it's getting worse. But anyway, so the point is that so these meds, if you take meds and you've read, the small print, what they give you, the papers, a piece of paper that you can, it's a huge, actually, it's a huge fucking sheet of paper. You open and you read it, and you like the medical information about the medicine. You read it, you will see that there are all kinds of complications that could arise, side effects. You hear things like it can induce suicidal thoughts. It can, I've seen things like dementia. Maybe people who take this medicine could have run a higher risk of developing dementia, and that's sort of like, it's just, these medicines, even if you take them and they work, they come at a cost. They come with side effects that could be mild, but also could be very severe. They're not going to make you happy. So one thing you have to understand is that if you're a sick person, mentally sick person, and you go and take meds, I'm on 3 different kinds of meds: an antipsychotic, a mood stabilizer, an antidepressant, or whatever the fuck it's called, the SSRI, SRS, reuptake bullshit, Prozac, Seroquel, and some other crap. I don't remember the name now. But I also used to take Xanax for a while, but my doctor says it's unhealthy for your brain. As if the others are right, as if the others are not. With all the, I don't know. I like Xanax the most. I'm not gonna lie to you. Calm me down. Doesn't make me really sleepy. Anyway. And so the point is that even if you do take these things, this is something that Adam also pointed out in his videos. It's had a YouTube channel, by the way. That even if you take these medicines, they will have severe side effects, and maybe you just don't want to deal with that anymore. Maybe you don't want to become a guinea pig. Become a Pavlovian subject, a subject of experimentation, a pigeon, a dog, a rat. Maybe you just don't want to do that. You don't want to run the risk of developing some awful disease because you've taken an antipsychotic for 10 years. You don't want to feel the side effects of, whatever, racing thoughts or a lack of passion, right? Whatever the side effect may be. For me, it's hard to say because on me, they have had pretty much no effect whatsoever. I feel like I have very vivid dreams. That's one thing. Other than that, maybe I talk to myself a little less, like maybe I'm a little bit more functional, maybe. But I feel just as awful, really. So whatever, but the point is, they have all these side effects, potential side effects that could be really awful, and maybe you just say, well, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. That, even if I could take this medication, I just don't want to deal with the fucking side effects anymore. I don't want to make myself a guinea pig. I don't want to run the risk of developing a terrible disease. I don't want to swallow 8, 10, 15 pills every single fucking day. I'm supposed to swallow 7. I haven't been able to do it because it's just so much work. I'm just like, fuck it. I haven't even taken my morning dose. It's the late afternoon. I'm just too depressed to even do it. I probably will, but I'm just like, oh, fuck. I'm supposed to take one of them 3 times a day. It's like, oh, fuck. I can hardly even brush my teeth once a day. It's just so annoying. And to have little to no effect, and then to run the risk of all these side effects. Which, if I had the paper here, I could read it to you, all the fucking side effects. I would be effective, but I don't have access to any of that stuff now. But, you can just go online and you can look at what the side effects are of medication. Could fuck you up. With something like cancer, you might just say, fuck it. I don't want to deal with the effects of that chemo. Let me just fucking die. Let me die. They say, no. You have to go and do the chemo. We're not just gonna give you the pill to die. Do the chemo. You may not be terminal. And it's like, well, what if I choose to be terminal? You know what I mean? I'm done. I'm through. It's over. And these were decisions that will have to be made because young people are so miserable. Everybody knows these days. The young generation, the current generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we're fucked in the fucking head. We're screwed. and this is not a topic we could get into, is how technology has screwed us all up in social media. But we all know this by now. Fast food, everything is available on your phone. No friends, no sex, no nothing. Just turn into a fucking. What are the memes nowadays? MRBEAST, KSI, just completely brain rot. We have a name for it. It's called brain rot. People can't read books. Like, we're so fucked. The planet is burning alive. It's October. It's the tail end of October. There are mosquitoes flying around. I should be probably wearing a coat by now, but I'm not, because it's hot. Like, it's okay. It's not like summer hot, but it's like, it's too hot. It's October the 20th right now. Why is it so fucking hot and sunny? You know what I mean? Bombs flying. Many countries are actually militarizing now.